positive psychology, because there is the school that wanted to look at just not pathology. Why is people messed up? Why do we have schizophrenia? Why do we have depression? Why do we have anxiety? There was enough of that study going on. But this psychologist came forward and wanted to look and see why were people surviving life in a very positive way. You know, and you look at their lives like in Macaulay and wondering, what's the secret? How come she can do that? And others gave up. Others died. They saw no hope, and yet she did. So they began, thankfully at that time they had a lot of money for research. Now that money's gone. You know, but we could write up grants. And I hope you can write another grant for another speaker to come. But there was that money to study different variables. So the School of Positive Psychology began to look and see what makes people survive. And one of the things that they found out was leading a grateful life. Being grateful. They found out that, you know, if you're grateful, you can have internally a change. And they began to study that. The way they did it was a couple of these researchers, psychologists, went to a campus and they recruited students. Had just every ordinary student, but they broke them up into 3 groups. They had one group which was going to be the study group, so they just kind of lived their life and told in their journal what they did that day. The next group had to tell in their journal, write every day in their journal when they're reflecting what they did that day, and one good thing that they got from that interchange. So if they went to a class, they were supposed to write, hey, today I learned that, what else, you know, positive, that I didn't know that. It was so insightful. And if they went to the cafeteria, even if the food was not all that acceptable, they had to find something. I had the Jell-O, and that was great. You can't go wrong with Jell-O. So, but that's all they did. And the third group was the griping group. They were supposed to gripe about something. Now, I don't know what, I have to get the main study for that result, because I picked up this article, and it says how the new science of thank you can change your life. But that's what we learned in kindergarten, that's what we learned in the family. We would be called, say thank you. What do you say when somebody does something kind to you? Say thank you, but this was the new science of thank you. They got the money, they did the study, and they got the results. And here are the results. Bear with me. Right off the bat, Emmons, this was a psychologist, it was Robert Emmons, who has a PhD and a professor of psychology at the University of California in Davis. And he had his fellow professor who joined him, Michael McCullough, of the University of Miami. They were the two that did the study. And what they found out right off the bat, Emmons and his team recognized there was something powerful about a regular gratitude check. This is where Winfrey Oprah would come in and then begin to tell you about keeping up. My mother always watched Oprah. You know, I would call her, and I knew that she was watching something on television because the first question said, I would call her and she said, how's Karen? Karen's my wife. I'd say, what do you want to know about Karen? I'm the one calling you. But you know, how's Karen? She's old school. How's Karen? How are the children? And I knew it was a sign that I don't have time to talk to you. No. So she was doing her checklist, and then it was goodbye. And I said, what are you watching, Mom? She said, I'm watching Oprah, and it's really good right now, so please. Okay, I'll talk to you later. And that's why Oprah got her insight to recommend to her viewers to keep a gratitude journal. that every night before you retire, be mindful of what happened today and find at least 3 to 5 things that you can say thank you. So it was nice that you, even though you were shouting to God, that you were able to also say thank you for being able to find, hey, I carry my passport everywhere I go. Not my original passport, I carry a copy passport. Now, these are the times where you need to have that document. So here it is. And regular gratitude check. And in a follow-up study, those who found something to appreciate every day, these are the results, were less materialistic, less apt to see a connection between life satisfaction and material things. They were more willing to part with their possessions. The bumper sticker that reads, "The one with the most toys wins," was unlikely to be found on any of their cars. The grateful people were less depressive, less envious, less anxious, and much more likely to help others. A fact not lost on those around them. When others were asked their impressions of the daily gratitude students, they generally judged the students as empathetic, helpful, and pro-social, more likely to put themselves out for others. The study found that people who were consciously grateful felt better about their lives, were more optimistic, were more energetic, were more enthusiastic, were more determined, were more interested, were more joyful, exercised more, had fewer illnesses, got more sleep, were more likely to have helped someone else. Related studies found out other benefits as well, of which could arguably be linked to a grateful mindset. Clearer thinking, better resilience during tough times, higher immune response, less likelihood of being plagued by stress, longer lives, closer family ties, greater spirituality. Along with thinner ties and six-pack abs, which I don't have. This is a fairly comprehensive list of what most of us would wish for. Just keeping a gratitude list. Being grateful for what we have and not seeking out what we don't. So, thankfully the School of Psychology, positive psychology, has affirmed what Jesus was saying so long ago. Be joyful, be glad, rejoice. Even in difficult times, I believe we sustain our spirituality by reflecting that joy. The O in joy stands for the other, being other-centered. You know, seeking justice, showing kindness, sharing mercy for our neighbor with humility towards the other. You know, Dr. Petrovich, Mike, and myself are walking, and we said to each other, we never know people's stories till you ask the question. Then they start to tell you. And you sit there in amazement at all the connections. So I'm sure that this is your experience at St. Vincent de Paul, when you're working with people who are down and out.
Right.
And then you start talking to them. And suddenly you find out, wow, they're just down and out, that's all. Because they're incredible, they have an incredible history. It's just this in the moment in time. And that helping hand is a handout, not a handout. It helps them to move on. And one day come back and say, thank you. That day I nearly gave up on life. And because of your smile, or because of your touch, because of your willingness to help, this is where I am today. And they will pay it forward. They will continue to pay it forward. So, being concerned, the O in joy is not to be navel gazers, looking at our own navels. Whether we have an innie or an outie, and that's another story, you know. But to be concerned about other people, to live that life. Matthew 25, chapter 25, is really the mandate of when, you know, the separation of the sheep and the goat. The sheep want to know what happened. Why us? You know, and there is the answer. And I want to go to Matthew 25 because it's worth the read. Matthew 25. They asked Jesus, when? You know, when were you hungry? He says, for I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was ill and you comforted me. In prison and you came to visit me. Then the just will ask the Lord, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? Or see you thirsty and give you to drink? When did we welcome you away from home? Or clothe you in your nakedness? When did we visit you when you were ill or in prison? The Lord will answer them, I assure you, as often as you did it for one of my least of my brothers and sisters, you finished the story.
You did it for me.
You did it for me. So every time we help someone, we are helping God. It's quite an put things in context. That joy is found when we are concerned about others. Jesus notes the importance of this finally. The Y in joy stands for you. You. Jesus notes the importance of taking care of you and loving oneself. Not as a narcissist who is in love with self. Looks in the mirror and says, I'm the most wonderful human being in the world. And moves on to tell everybody else how wonderful they are. Instead, as one who deeply appreciates the specialness of creation, our uniqueness. What is the greatest commandment? You know, we find it in Matthew 22. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And this is the other crux, because combine two different laws here. And to love your neighbor, and you finish the last part.
As thyself.
As thyself. So you cannot love your neighbor or you cannot love God if there's no love for self. A lot of people don't like themselves, and then they don't like anybody else. But if we appreciate who we are, then I'm just a grain of sand, but I am a grain of sand that makes up the seashell. And I'm important to that existence. Then I can begin to share that with others. You know, the invitation to look after ourselves. However, in our humanness, we do fall short of our calling. Again, Jesus invites us to practice forgiveness. We did that prayer in the service this morning. He invites us to forgive. Jesus tells Peter to forgive his brother. Peter comes up and asks, how many times do I forgive him? 7 times? And how many times did Jesus say? 70 times? 7 times, yeah. So if you do the math, it means only 490 times. Not true. There's a significance about that 7. You see, in the Hebrew mind, numbers were very important. And they used numbers to express language and the narrative. So it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. We're in the midst of Lent. We're fasting for 40 days. Now don't tell anybody else. You start on Ash Wednesday and you end on Easter Sunday. Sundays are not counted. So you can do whatever you want to do on Sunday. But we don't give that message out too quickly. So people give up on something and they stay all that way till Easter Sunday, right? But it's 40 days and 40 nights. You know why 40? Well, Abraham was 800 and, there are multiples of 40 that are used. They sojourned in the desert for 40 years. Now, something like, what's this 40? 40 was a way of saying for a long time. So instead of saying, they put a number to it as shock value. Oh yeah, 40 days. Oh yeah, 40 years. Oh yeah, 800. That was. And then number 12 was for everyone. So the 12 tribes of Israel. Everybody will be saved. And then in Revelation, it's a multiple of 12. 144,000 will be saved. Now, if you take that very literally, where are we? But it was that number was so huge that everyone has the opportunity. So 12 was that number, saying everybody, even the baskets that were left over, even the 5 and the 2, there are significance to that, all of that. 6 was a number of imperfection. So that's where the term the 666 comes from. Because the emperor, who was, in the book of Revelation, the emperor, if you added the letters to the name, it added to 666. So instead of saying the name and not being persecuted, they just said 666. And that they knew was evil incarnate, Satan himself. So 6 was imperfection. When were we created? On what day? Remember, God created the 7 days? When did God create human beings? The 6th day. He created the human beings, and the 7th day God rested. So He created us on an imperfect day. That's why we can never be perfect, because 7 stands for perfection. You see, 7 is, the world was created in 7 days. You see multiples of 7 again and again, signifying perfection. So when Peter asked, should I forgive him 7 times, meaning perfectly, the Lord comes out and says, no, perfection times perfection. As many times as your brother needs forgiveness, why don't you forgive? Well, Jesus was really being psychological there. Jesus knew that forgiveness was not about Peter's brother. Forgiveness was about Peter. He said, Peter, if you want to be liberated, if you want to be free, as many times as you are asked to forgive, please forgive. You see, the Jesus of psychology and the Jesus of history, one and the same. Because even in forgiveness, they have done wonderful studies. Again, have you heard of Fred Luskin, Dr. Fred Luskin? Okay, Dr. Fred Luskin, he's on PBS quite a bit, and you can Google him, he's still at Stanford. He's the one who started the Stanford Project on Forgiveness. But he came out of, I had the pleasure of hearing him speak many, many years ago. And he first started out at the VA, back east. And he noticed that people, veterans, unlike your dad, who cared for the German soldiers, there were veterans that came from Germany that didn't care for any German product. Never wanted, and Ellie was like, never wanted to sell a home to a German. You see, and at the same time he had people at the clinic that had served in the Pacific. And they felt that way about the Japanese. So they would never buy anything made in Japan. So it was interesting. Some were buying things made in Germany, who fought in Japan, and the ones that fought in Japan were buying things that were made, fought in Germany, were buying things made in Japan. That was the senselessness of it all. But what he noticed was that people, they were dying from heart attacks and, just struggles. And he went on this journey to find out what makes people happy. You know, how can you have happiness? And out of happiness, he found out that a key ingredient to happiness was forgiveness. And forgiveness, he says he's not a Christian, he doesn't push religion forgiveness. He is coming strictly from a secular standpoint of looking at the value of forgiveness. So for many years at Stanford, he taught a class on happiness. And it was one of the most well-attended classes. And from there, he got students, and then when he started this project on forgiveness, he began to look at, he went to Ireland, and he brought people from Ireland whose mothers were Catholic, and they lost a son during the Irish conflict, and Irish Protestant conflict, and he brought Protestant mothers who had lost a child, brought them to Stanford, kept them for a week, and helped them through this process of forgiveness. He's come up with 7 ways to forgive, 7 steps, and then he broke it down and made less and that. But if you want, this book is excellent. It's called Forgive for Good by Dr. Fred Luskin. And he says forgiveness, and he'll claim, he'll say, I'm not pushing any religion. You know, he says forgiveness. What is forgiveness? Forgiveness is the peace. That's him, Dr. Fred Luskin, PhD. He says forgiveness is the peace you learn to feel when you allow these circling planes in your head about revenge, you know, resentment, and all of these planes that circle in our head during quiet times to land. Forgiveness is for you and not the offender. Forgiveness is taking back your power. Forgiveness is taking responsibility on how you feel. Forgiveness is about your healing and not about people who hurt you. Forgiveness is trainable skill, just like learning to throw a baseball. Forgiveness helps you get control over your feelings. Forgiveness can improve your mental and physical health. Forgiveness is becoming a hero instead of a victim. Forgiveness is a choice, and everyone can learn to forgive. Now he also says what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not condoning unkindness. We got to speak to that. Forgiveness is not forgetting that something painful happened. Something happened here and you changed me. Forgiveness is not excusing poor behavior. My children tell me that. If I falter one moment and say, Dad, that's not unkind, that's unkind. You know, boom, oh, okay. Forgiveness does not have to be outwardly or religious experience. It's psychological. Forgiveness is not denying or minimizing your hurt. Forgiveness does not mean reconciling with the offender. Forgiveness does not mean you give up having feelings. I do not suggest that forgiveness means we give up our right to be angry when we have been hurt or mistreated. My forgiveness research shows that people retain the ability to be angry by simply using that ability more wisely. You know, so you've heard, I will never forgive him over my dead. Why? And a lot of people die because of that. Because of the lack of forgiveness. So there it is, that we can take care of ourselves by paying attention to us. What is driving me? What is driving me positively? What sustains me in difficult times, troubling times, terrifying times? What's driving me the other way? To join them, to be part of the persecuted. And it's easy. It's very easy to do that. That crossroad can pull us either way. And so we're always doing a self-check. What's going on with me? And there we learn about forgiveness. I'm not going to show you the clip. During these troubling times, for us as individuals, couples, communities, our nation, and our world, sustaining our spirituality remains paramount to our existence and that of our neighbor. if we don't sustain each other, we will die together. The parable that Jesus told about the Good Samaritan instructs us how to be good neighbors too. I'm honored by your gracious presence here. You've taken the time with daylight saving time, so you're an hour short of sleep. There's so many other things going on in our community, and that's a good thing. People have a choice. That you chose to be here, I'm grateful. And I realize that sometimes people have no choice. They're caught up in their own prison cells, whatever that prison cell may be. I'm really deeply grateful to my mentors. I always have tears, because you don't know how much you both have done, not only for me, but for so many people. I know those people. I walked with them and I served some of them. You know, so for Drs. Ann and Mike Petrovich. And they represent all the mentors that I've had, that took me under their wings and formed and nurtured and cared for me. Your pastor is not here, but I'm indebted to your pastor and to the committee for your kind invitation and warm hospitality. As we part, I share with you one of my favorite poems by Robert Frost. The road not taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as far that the passing there had won them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads unto way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. I pray that the road you have chosen to travel will make all the difference for you, for us, and for all of creation. Thank you so much for your attention. You've been a blessed audience. I'll open up to questions.